Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. That's the cue to just keep chewing the food that's in your mouth, but maybe not talk as much. Okay, there we go. Hey, so good afternoon. My name is Luke Fedlam. I'll share a little bit more here in a moment. But what I'd like to do first is we always want to recognize the sponsors that allow this wonderful event to take place. And so one of our leadership level sponsors is this Columbus CEO Collective. So Dr. Elizabeth Joy is going to bring some remarks and share a little bit more with us. So how about a round of applause, please?
Thank you, Luke. Appreciate you. Good morning, everybody. Ooh, these heels are kind of tall, y'all. Shit. All right, good morning. How are you? Is it afternoon? Good afternoon. I am Dr. Elizabeth Joy. I'm president and CEO of the Columbus CEO Collective. And on behalf of our founder, Sean Grant, and our chairman, the one and only Alex Shoemate, who's here with us today, I bring you well wishes and a happy new year. There's no better way to kick off a new year than in a room full of Black excellence. Would you agree? Yes, yes. We don't get to do this very often, do we? So we are a proud sponsor of the Life by Design Luncheon and a supporter of the African American Leadership Academy and the amazing legacy of Donna and Larry James. We are super excited to be partnering with AALA this coming year as we focus on the alignment between the missions of these two organizations. So just as the AALA is unwavering in its commitment to developing African American leaders, the Columbus CEO Collective is unapologetically committed to the economic mobility of our people and specifically to generational Black wealth. That said, as we prepare to hear from this panel on Black wealth, which I'm sure we're all interested and excited to hear about, I wanted to share 5 core components about success and leadership that I have learned on my journey working with some of the top leaders, elite athletes, Fortune 500 companies on both business and personal success. And these lessons emerged in my primary research that I conducted on elite performers, including NFL and NBA athletes, CEOs, investors, and business owners, all making at least $500,000 a year. Most of them were millionaires. These lessons really focus on power, defining success, boundaries, self-leadership, and the power of trauma. Now, when we think about leadership, and I think we would all agree in this room that servant leadership is a huge component to how we see leadership, right? And many of us would argue that the impact that we make as leaders is more important than the power we have as leaders. However, one of the lessons that I have learned and seen in the most successful leaders who have risen to the top in their industries is that they embrace and leverage power. And I think that we often, as Black folks especially, because power has been used against us so much, we kind of get queasy when it comes to the word power and the concept of power. But a true leader, and when you think about the legacy of Donna and Larry James, certainly impact is well represented in the room, but that took power, the ability to embrace power and learn how to use it effectively. And so I want to encourage you all to think about your relationship with the concept of power. The second lesson is that elite leaders have an evolving definition of success. Every single participant in my research talked about how what they thought was success or what they were looking to achieve changed as they moved on and progressed in their careers, in their finances, and in their lives. And so I encourage you to consider that what you think about success today should be something that's open for review and consideration and edit, right? And one of the ways that the definition that we have of success must evolve is sometimes challenging what we think about when we think about ourselves as being communal, caring, Christian, and kind, which are all great virtues. But successful and wealthy leaders also have strong boundaries. And I think we as a people sometimes struggle with how much do we give, where do we draw that line? And so you'll notice when you've been perhaps seen a celebrity or someone extremely successful Or maybe you've seen them at a game, right? You just had a quick interaction with them. Oftentimes we have negative perspectives about them because they didn't take the time, or you'll hear someone that knew them say that, you know, once they got to where they were, they forgot where they came from. But what I can tell you is that as you elevate in your success, and certainly in your finances, you will learn, and probably the hard way, that boundaries are critical. And so we have to learn how to be kind and Christian and caring and draw the line, even with our family, with our children, and our friends. The fourth one is that every successful leader is first and foremost committed to self-leadership. You cannot lead others when you don't effectively lead yourself. And so that's everything from disciplining yourself to do what you say you're going to do, to get up in the morning when you said you were. I know, how many of y'all got New Year's resolutions? How's that going so far? Right? So self-leadership is a prerequisite to being a great leader of others. And lastly, elite performers leverage negative emotions and pain to fuel themselves. A lot of folks think that when you see the highest performing, most successful leaders, that somehow they didn't have as hard of a life as you did. I can tell you that every person in my research, which I did not know their past experiences when I recruited them for the study, all of them had some sort of difficult life experiences in their childhood. But the difference between the most successful folks and those who are struggling to get there is that elite, successful leaders leverage that pain to fuel them to the top. They don't define themselves by what happened to them. They literally juice themselves up. Anytime someone doubts them, anytime there's an obstacle ahead of them, they find a way to use that to power themselves to the top. So it's not that they're not experiencing any of the things that you have. They've experienced all the things that you have, but they leverage that to propel themselves to the top. So in closing, I do want to acknowledge we are heavy right now, yes, as we prepare for this shift in Washington, D.C. But I want to remind you to remember who you are. Black people are undefeated against any and everything that has ever been set forth to try to hold us back. Agreed? We are undefeated. So if you're feeling anxious or concerned, I would say to look in the mirror and remember who you are. And that's why you're here. Your job is to be a light in the rooms that you're in and to be a leader in every space that you walk into. So I look forward to encountering you all in the coming year and wish you the best in your leadership journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizabeth Joy. Okay, let's get right into it. So join me in welcoming to the stage for this Black Wealth panel, Carrington Carter, Donna James, Dwight Smith. We're going to have a great conversation on Black Wealth. So while everyone gets situated on stage, I'll say this. In this room, these three people really don't need an introduction, but if you would like to learn more about who they are, you can go into the app, you can see their bio. We will not waste time going through such long, lengthy, and successful bios of people today. So please, if you do want to learn more, go ahead and check out the app and you can find all of the speaker bios. Hello everyone. I'll tell you, as a moderator, your job is just to facilitate conversation. That's what I plan to do. And what we're going to do today is really have a conversation around Black wealth. Now, oftentimes I do not like going down the row and coming back and going down and asking the same question. So we're gonna change things up a bit. But I do want to start with the same question for all three of our panelists. And we can start off right to my left. We'll go with Dwight, then we'll go with Carrington, and we'll wrap with Donna around a simple question. How do define wealth? What does wealth mean to you? We're about to have this conversation around black wealth. When you hear wealth or you hear generational wealth, what does that mean to you? What does that evoke within you, and how do you define it so that we can all have context for the conversation that we're about to have?
So I've already asked Donna for grace, so here we go. I asked Donna, this is overwhelming. This experience and being here with you is just amazing. So I said to Donna a few minutes ago, so Donna, what do you think? Look what you've done. And her reaction was this. which says she and Larry are so humble, but the fact of the matter, they are changing not only Columbus, but Tulsa and Charlotte. And just 20, 30, 50 years from now, what you all have done and those that follow will be changing the world. So I'd like to take a moment, I apologize, to acknowledge Donna. And I know you didn't like it when I did that, but that's just who she is. So thank you, Donna. Thank you, Donna. So, a couple things about wealth. People talk about your net worth, which, mathematically that's your assets minus your liabilities. And I always say to people, don't ever let your net worth, your balance sheet, define your net worth as an individual. So many times people get caught up in, I'm wealthy, therefore I am worth more. No, there is a difference. The other thing is people talk about wealth as it relates to financial freedom, right? Once I am wealthy, I am financially free. Well, this is just my thought. Freedom is when you're not tied to and reliant on other things. Renee and I have been married for 19 years. We've been very blessed financially in that regard, but we've always said, if I'm running a company or if I'm sweeping floors at a McDonald's, I am who I am. So don't ever let your net worth define who you are. I think that's really important. But in regards to mathematical terms, I read a book a long time ago called Money Dynamics in the 80s, and they talked about wealth and what your number is. And this is the way mathematically it could work out. Each of you know that if you retire today, you'd want to have X number of dollars per month coming in. Pick a number, $30,000 a month, right? And then you say mathematically, I want to retire 10 years from now, and I think inflation is going to be 4% a year. So you can do the math, and what you'll find out is 10 years from now, that $30,000 a month is $42,000 or whatever it is. And then you mathematically say, how much money do I have to have invested to draw 5% off of it to make that monthly lifestyle that I want to create? I ran that through ChatGPT, actually. And it was just over $10 million, right? So kind of think about your lifestyle. But again, I've seen people really struggle with so much focus on net worth that they forget about all the things that are more important. We can talk about strategies and all that, and I'm going to be very open and transparent later on. But.
All right. Well, you can be as open and transparent as you want. So let's go. Carrington, what do you think?
All right. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm going to give you 4 quick definitions. First, there's public market investing and private market investing. Public market investing is what most people are familiar with, stock, bonds, things that trade on public markets. But a lot of the good deals, the very lucrative deals, take place in the private markets. So a lot of the real estate development in Columbus, those were private deals. A lot of startups, a lot of emerging companies, those all take place in private markets. And so the definitions, accredited investor is the minimum threshold to participate in private market investing. And if you're not familiar with any of these terms, please write them down and research them later. Accredited investor is a minimum definition, $200,000 in annual household income as an individual, $300,000 as a married couple, or $1 million net worth excluding primary residence. Second, qualified client is a next step up, and that's $2.2 million net worth. And then the highest threshold for private market deals is a qualified purchaser, and more or less you have to have $5 million of investments. So if we think about closing the wealth gap, I think you should pay attention to those definitions and trying to achieve those levels to be able to participate in more lucrative private market deals in order to close the wealth gap. And then lastly, key term, I believe in you capital. A lot of times, because of our financial standing, we don't have the ability to sow "I believe in you" capital seeds to the next generation of business owners, to the next startups. And so I encourage everyone to get to the level where you can sow those seeds of "I believe in you" capital so we can propel the next generation.
I love this, don't you? You get such a diversity of thought and exposure. When I think about wealth, for me, it's been an evolving growth path of growing into what does it mean to have wealth and be wealthy. And in the beginning, and I still believe this, what I wanted most out of life is just to be able. I wanted to be able to take care of my family. I wanted to be able to help my brothers and sisters get a college education. I wanted to be able to help my mom and my immediate family. And the vision of what able looks like, it kind of grows. And it grows because you're out in the world, you're getting exposed, you're doing the math, you anticipate retirement or stepping back. And then I wanted to be able to do more. And I remember starting, bad credit score, a lot of hospital bills from an illness and my mother. I remember being in a home that we had just purchased before Larry and I had gotten married, and rolling pennies and quarters and nickels and dimes out of a change jar. And I was a manager at Nationwide, but I had a young son, I had a brother, his wife, and their baby, and my mother, who was disabled, living with me. And I needed to be able to take care of them, as well as able to understand what the next level could look like for myself. So constantly fighting that dynamic. And I'm in a very different place today, and I still just want to be able. And so for me, wealth is about making sure my family is okay, not as a crutch, but enabling them. It's also about making sure Larry and I have enough set aside so when we figure out that we really want to stop, we can stop. And we could stop today, but it's not that easy sometimes because you got to figure out what you want to do next. The other piece for me in the very beginning is I would write down a number. When I didn't have any money in the bank, my first number was $1,000. When I got that $1,000 in the bank, my next number was 10. And I was like, ooh, this works. Now, I thought writing it down was the answer, but there's a discipline that you have to evolve on the journey for wealth and being wealthy, however you define it. And then I would write down bigger numbers. And then I stopped writing down the numbers because I learned the rules and the laws of investing a little bit, all the time, over time, and not touching it. And separating that money from the money I needed to live off of. I learned every time I got a bonus, when I got to the point I got bonuses, that's money I wasn't expecting. I was hoping it would come, performance was there. I'd put away 50% of that at a minimum, but then I'd go buy myself something. I do something for myself. So the journey to wealth for me, and now sitting on boards, and to my colleagues' points, watching how businesses create and drive wealth, and the people who lead those businesses, and the people who have ownership in it, whether it's private ownership in a private company, or it's public company ownership through the stock that they own. And founding these businesses and starting these businesses, but growing them and being focused on their growth. But it also means they're growing personally. Because sometimes an entrepreneur will start off, they have a great idea, but they're not the person that can run the business for the long haul. And some tough decisions have to be made at some point in time. Dr. Joy talked about wealth as power and leveraging power. This is wealth. This is leveraging power. And I appreciate the acknowledgement of my engagement in this, But without leveraging the power of many of you in this room, when we first started and up until this day, this would not be happening. So this is a perfect example of leveraging power, which is, for me, generational wealth.
Thank you. So Dwight, Donna just shared kind of her journey, right, her wealth journey. You said you want to be open and transparent. Do you mind sharing with us what was your journey like? How was your journey over time? How was your view of wealth? How has it evolved over time?
So I should have started by acknowledging my faith, right? So everything I do, I pray over. You know, what you've heard here is there is responsibility that comes with wealth and giving back. I think the Bible says to whom much is given, much is required. And I think that's one of the many things that many of us have in common, that as we create wealth on that journey, that we will make sure that we pay it forward and do so in a big way. So I started working at IBM. We all do our income taxes at the end of the year. You look at your income taxes, 99% of your income's from your job and 1% from your investments, and you keep diversifying, and all of a sudden it's 90% from your job and 10%, and then it gets to be 50-50. At some point in time, the revenue, the wealth is growing outside of your employment, and so you become much more free. And that's exactly what happened to me. Renee and I, the way we look at wealth is we have 4 pillars. It's pretty interesting. The first pillar is operating companies, because they throw off cash, and we've been blessed to own a company for 33 years. But that's one pillar, right? The second pillar is real estate, and we've got an expert sitting right here. You generate a $10 million portfolio that spends off 5% a year. That's $500,000 a year while you sleep. And that doesn't even account for the fact that you are paying down debt and getting appreciation. Did I get that about right? The third pillar, which Donna touched on, is stocks and bonds and traditional investments, but also alternative investments, because high risk, high reward. And your risk profile will evolve over time. And I'm thinking about things like, out of Columbus, Ohio, Stonehenge. We've been involved with Stonehenge for a decade. Rockbridge Capital, some of the funds at Rev 1, and others, right? As well as, and sometimes you get singles, sometimes doubles, sometimes a home run. To be transparent, we invested in the casinos. When Dan Gilbert built the 4 casinos in Ohio, we got a 5x return on that investment many years ago. You take that money, you redeploy it to other things. And then what Donna touched on is that fourth pillar is other income, like board fees. And again, I'm going to be transparent. Sat on the board at State Auto for 17 years. We sold to Liberty. I had been taking my board fees and deferring them for tax reasons. When Liberty bought State Auto, they cashed out the board members. My check was north of $2.5 million, right? So you think about those 4 different pillars, but the most important part is we take those 4 pillars to create income and wealth, and we push it over to our foundation, the Thanks Be to God Foundation. And that's what we want to do. That's what we want to use. So for me, creating more wealth has nothing to do with a bigger house or another car. It has everything to do with getting money redeployed, wealth redeployed, to make the world a better place. That's the journey.
Yeah, amen.
Amen.
That's good. So Carrington, I want to come back to you, and real estate is something that in the Black community is very popular. Oftentimes because it's tangible, right? We can see it, we can touch it. I saw that building, I own a part of that building, et cetera. What has your experience in the real estate market been? Because a lot of times people think, oh, I can do that. That's easy, right? But it's not so easy. So maybe, again, in the interest of transparency and honesty of the conversation that AALA kind of creates, what's your process been like? How has that evolved for you?
Sure. So I have a previous life in pharmaceutical marketing and advertising. So I worked about 10 years in corporate America, similar experience to many that you all have had. So I got my start in real estate. I was making 6 figures, first job at a business school. I was literally buying houses during the Great Recession with every single paycheck. Like literally every dime I had, I was plowing it into real estate. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, so not too far from here. Okay, see we got some Dayton folks here. So I was investing in, single-family homes and neighborhoods that I knew, that I grew up in, 3 or 4 bedroom houses, buying them for $50,000, $60,000, because I was a student of the game. I say a lot about being a student of the game. You have to know the game. You have to monitor macro and microeconomic trends. You need to watch CNBC, so be a student of the game, and I knew the values would eventually rebound. So that's how I built my initial wealth through single-family homes in Dayton, Ohio. I flipped that into luxury vacation rental homes. So if you all have traveled somewhere and rented a house somewhere, we have owned through various entities, about a $50 million portfolio of luxury vacation rental homes. Now we're across about 5 states. So I wanted to get into pivoting from long-term rentals to short-term rentals with dynamic pricing, and you can fluctuate based on seasonality and demand for events. So been in that space for the last 10 years, saw those kind of initial trends. Then decided to scale that business. People were asking how they can invest with us, so started a private equity firm, East Chop Capital. Didn't go to a top 5 or 10 business school, didn't work on Wall Street, but again, being a student of the game, learning by doing, reading books. This is the information age. Anything you want, and ChatGPT wasn't out. It's out now, but it wasn't out when I got started. So real estate is a big portion of what we're doing, and then we also have a real estate development pipeline of about $500 million. We own about 6 to 7 acres in a core downtown area down in Alabama. I'm not going to reveal too much about it now, plus an additional 150 acres, and we're pretty much going to build a whole town, taking advantage of some of the trends with folks moving down south and looking for more favorable price points for real estate. And then much similar to what Dwight was saying, you take successes and wins and wealth from one area and diversify into other areas. So that's when I started getting more aggressive in angel investing. Sometimes I forget what we've invested in. So part of our strategy has been investing in funds and venture capital funds. And with that, you put 25K, 50K into a fund, you get exposure to 30 or 40 companies. So we've done that across 2 venture capital funds, one run by Alexis Ohanian, who's the co-founder of Reddit and also Serena Williams' husband. Invested in his fund. Nazir Kadri is another venture capital fund we invested in. Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey, if there are any whiskey drinkers out here, invested in that company, phenomenal story. We invested in a couple fintech companies, and so those are, going for home runs, high risk, high reward. 2 fintechs, one's an insurtech company based in Ghana. We've invested in a artificial intelligence real estate development company technology. And in professional sports franchises. You see valuations for sports franchises are going through the roof. I grew up playing soccer, so I'm close to the game, and Columbus Crew season ticket holder. So I know the potential for professional sports, and then I know mostly soccer is undervalued. It's a global sport, but it's not as popular in the U.S. yet. So we've started to invest in professional sports franchises. So very diverse portfolio, but at the end of the day, it's business, and once you understand certain core concept of business, then you can take those learnings to different industries.
Whew.
Can
I need to borrow a
add
couple
something
dollars,
here?
bro. All right, so-
Yeah, I love it. No, this
That is good. So go ahead.
No,
go.
the one thing I wanted to add is you heard him say you got to be a student of the game.
Yes.
There are a lot of games out there to play, and you always play to win. But it's the relationships that get you connected to these options that you grow into and learn from over time. And you don't bet house money. You don't bet the money you need to live off of. You are putting money into opportunities that you don't want to lose, but if you lost, you don't lose. You're learning, and you can still keep moving and moving forward. My portfolio is a lot of stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Putting that money away, hiring someone that I trust, a broker, investor, who understands it, having relationships with people who, if a deal comes up, they might call me and say, Donna, this is going on. Are you interested? And I may be and I may not be, because I know what games I understand and which ones I don't. But when you have a trusted co-investor, it makes a big difference. But figuring out who you can trust with the money that you can bet and bank on, but the key is you got to build that first initial amount and flip it into the next and into the next and into the next. But you've got to build that first initial amount, whatever that is. When I started at Nationwide and I retired from Nationwide, I had a little nest egg. I put that aside. I went into the boards. 50% of board fees are cash, the other half is stock. I take my cash, I invest part of that, but I leave the stock. And every time I leave a board, I cash out. I diversify. So there are strategies. That's the game that I have figured out how to play over the last 20 years.
So Carrington, I want to follow up real quick because I like Donna mentioned, kind of really stuck when you said being a student of the game. Great, right? But how did you become a student of the game? And we know you went to business school, got it, right? But for people that are saying, okay, I want to maybe start with some of the things that Donna mentioned, right? Maybe I start with a number, but then how do I learn when I've gotten that 1,000 or that 10,000? Now I'm at, how does somebody learn? What did you do to actually learn how you were making some of these decisions?
Yeah, so freshman year in college, shout out to Hampton University. Any Hampton, there we go. there we go. Honors college. No, I'm just kidding. So freshman year at Hampton, I read a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm sure everybody has read it or heard about it, but that introduced the concept of having your money work for you, not just working for your money. So that was kind of the initial learning, so to speak. And then I've always been an avid reader, so just read a ton of books over the years. And then also a lot of it's just been learning by doing. A lot of times you don't really get the true learnings unless you take the bumps and bruises, the experiences. And to Ms. James' point, surrounding yourself with the right people, following people in the deals, forming a trusted cohort of peers that you invest with. But a lot of it's been learning by doing. And then with real estate, there's the passive investing side, which we do more of now, but there's also the active investing side. So being a landlord, taking those late night calls, being on the Airbnb app, answering guest inquiries to understand the intricacies of their demands, what they're looking for. All of that gives you valuable experience to be a better businessman and a better operator. Related to investing, so there's a term we use, hard ROI versus soft ROI. So hard ROI, those are the returns, the cash-on-cash returns, the dividends, the capital appreciation. But sometimes just as important is what we call the soft ROI. That is the learning, it's the experience, it's the relationships of being in that particular investment. I mean, we made some investments just to get in that room, be exposed to that opportunity, to learn that industry. So we found often it's the soft ROI that's so much more valuable than the hard ROI. But a lot of times, we as a people, because of either inexperience with investing or fear or things we've heard from other people, we're very risk averse. So anytime we put out $5, we want 10 back in 6 months. And that's, if you find those deals and they're safe and they're legal, let me know. But that's often not how investing works. That's not how real estate investing works, specifically related to real estate. And then, most deals, we say real estate, the game it's always been long, but it's gotten longer. Now with inflation, rising costs, insurance, construction, labor costs, it's a much longer game. So whereas your strategy before might have been a 3 to 5 year exit, maybe a 10-year exit, now you got to be thinking 20, 30 years, passing this deal or this asset or this opportunity down to the next generation and estate planning. But a lot of it's been learning by doing and reading books and choosing education over entertainment. There's no shortage of ways to entertain yourself and distract yourself. Got to choose education over entertainment.
Absolutely, that's a word right there. A good word. Dwight, Carrington mentioned kind of some bumps and bruises. So I'd be curious, as you look back on your journey of wealth building, what are some of the bumps and bruises that you experienced that you really learned from, that you grew from, that maybe in the moment seemed quite significant, but you look back and maybe that gave you some of that soft ROI, that return?
Well, so racism exists. Period. It just does. So I'll give you a quick story about a bump and a bruise. So I'm running SSI, and we're 5 or 10 years into it, and I'm sitting with a client on a Friday afternoon, and they're one of many clients, and I said to the client, my son's got a ball game, I gotta go. It's 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. The client says to me, is he any good? I said, yeah, he's a starting point guard. Client says to me, really, what school? I said, New Albany. He sat up, leaned in, and looked at me and said the following: you live in New Albany? We must be paying you too much money. Right? We must be paying you too much money. To which I immediately responded, I will never apologize for wanting for my kids what you want for yours.
That's right.
Right? And he apologized, but make no mistake, frankly, I'd rather him say that to my face so we could have that dialogue than say it after I leave the room, right? And speaking of the room, I was driving out today, room when it happens, I was listening to some stuff from Hamilton, and the fact of the matter is, we need to get in the room more often, number one, and number two, when we're in the room, we need to bring more people in. Some of you know of Rev 1. They had something called the OTAF, Ohio Tech Angel Fund, which John Houston did. You may remember John 25 years ago. They had a meeting at the New Albany Country Club. There were 200 people in the room. The deal was we were angel investing. We're going to put $25,000 in, get the 99 people, get matching funds from the state of Ohio, and go out and start investing. 200 people. I called a fellow afterwards. He said, "What'd you think?" Pretty exciting. And I said to him, there's got to be more than one black person in Columbus, Ohio with $25,000. Why am I the only person in the room? That doesn't make any sense. I mentioned Rockbridge earlier, and I know there are people in this room that are involved with Rockbridge. We got involved with Rockbridge because we were leaving the Columbus Club one evening, and there was a sign that said Rockbridge. I said, that's intriguing. The door was cracked. I stuck my head in, and I recognized a lot of very wealthy Caucasians sitting in the conference room at the Columbus Club with their checkbooks on the table. And I said, I think I'm going to go over and learn a little bit more about Rockbridge. And we did, and we've done a couple deals with them. But there are people in this room. Finally went to Rockbridge. I should have done it sooner, and said, I want to see more people that look like me investing with you. So why don't you host a meeting so I can bring some people of color in, and you can walk them through your business model. And we did it right downtown at the Junto. Does that sound about right? I think he was there that night. But the fact of the matter is we got to push to get into the room. We have to create some rooms on our own, right? But when we're in that room, we need to take that knowledge and those opportunities and spread that. And if the answer is no, I'm not interested, at least you have the exposure.
Exposure. That's, and I just want to add to that, because this whole notion of how you learn and where you start. I'm a CPA by training. As soon as you say that, people think you know everything. I hate taxes, I don't want to do my own, and I don't want to do yours. And I knew nothing about stocks, bonds, mutual funds. It didn't teach me that. I wanted to learn. I would be in rooms where the guys in the rooms would be talking about their portfolio and how it was doing. I didn't have a portfolio. I took the first $5,000 that I got in a bonus. Well, maybe it was the second one, because the first $5,000 I got, I did something with that was a hard lesson. I trusted the wrong person, and they lost it all. The second, I said, I need to learn about stocks and bonds. I need to understand how the market works. I took that $5,000, I put it in an account, and I started buying stocks myself, knowing I'd probably lose some money, but I needed to feel it and feel it in a way that it wasn't detrimental to me. It was play money. It was nothing to play with because, I didn't want to lose it, but I had to understand it. Then I, learned, lost some money, made a little bit, but not enough off the $5,000. That was just getting me started to just get my feet wet and kind of understand just how the system works. Then I reached out to an individual who ran an investment management firm on the fixed income side. I didn't really know what that meant. He invited me. I flew down to Texas, saw his operation. I can't think of the guy's name. I learned a lot. These opportunities come to you, either you engineer them. How many were in the class this morning when we talked about engineering opportunities, right? You engineer them, you create them, or they come to you and you can say yes or no to them, but you can explore them just to learn. Don't be afraid that you don't know. Don't be afraid that other people are going to know I don't know. There's an app a good friend of mine turned me on to maybe 5 years ago. It's called Seeking Alpha. And it's an easy app to just watch what stocks do and watch what analysts say about these stocks. These are businesses that are either underperforming or people are in over their skis thinking that they're going to run up, and they don't. And they're losing money. Some people talk about I want to be a day trader. That's a game. You better be clear about how to play it. But if you're going to start to play, just start with a little bit and know that you're learning and know that you're going to hit your head a few times. but you're going to grow as you grow into these other alternative investments and build these relationships of people that are doing what might be considered some serious investing.
So, Donna, I want to stick with you kind of on this question. So, Dwight brought up racism, right? And I think we would be failing the conversation to not address that when addressing the wealth disparity gap that exists. There's a good book, just as a quick shout out to there's a good book called Meta-Racism. It's by Trisha Rose. She's a professor at either Princeton or Brown. And she talks about and looks at, and it just came out this year, and she talks about, or well, last year, 2024, whatever, you get the details. But she talks about the impact of racism even today, right? And how as a system, she specifically talks about the wealth gap and how it continues to grow, that there is this disparity that continues to grow for a host of different reasons, and we can't solve all those reasons today. But my question, Donna, for you, if you could share some perspectives on how do you overcome that? If we're talking about, broadly speaking, a group of African-American leaders who are, many people in this room, high earners, how do you overcome this racial wealth gap and turn being a high earner into a high net worth individual that develops and grows wealth, successfully?
So my colleague here talked about reading a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's getting familiar with concepts that we were not taught, we were not exposed to. We don't even know they're out there. You know how we go through AALA, we talk about a mindset and how we take you through strategies and concepts that shift your thinking. This is about shifting our thinking because we just don't know what we don't know, and we can read, but getting together in groups, even if it's an investing group, even if you decide to buy a property, learning the language, but it's going to be who you associate with. And I think also getting over our fear of that we don't know and asking questions, being curious about how these folks made their money. And understanding we're starting behind the 8 ball because we don't have the wealth my colleague was talking about initially is intergenerational wealth of having an asset, whether it's land, whether it's a piece of property that's been passed down from one generation to the next, or, as Dr. Joy was speaking to, it's a business that gets started. And learning the language and the game of growing a business versus just having a business that pays my bills and I'm comfortable. There's nothing wrong with that, but the whole notion of starting a business that you have an exit strategy in your mind around because you're going to monetize or maximize that business at some point. It's a mindset, and we have to share that with each other, but individually, we've got to reach out and read, but also reach out and stub our toe and be okay with what we don't know, because that's the only way we're going to learn it.
Yeah. Carrington, Donna talked about we, right? And in some of your remarks earlier when you talked about your wealth journey, you said we quite a bit. We've done this, we've done that. You don't have to get into particulars, but kind of what has that we looked like for you? How have you developed that we? Who did you look for when, if you think about wealth building as a team sport, who has been your team? And to something that Donna mentioned earlier, having, placed some money initially with somebody that did something that, just was not a good outcome. How did you avoid, or how have you avoided, kind of watching out for those people that maybe don't have your best interests in mind? How have you created your team?
So my main business partner, Calvin Butch Jr., lives in South Jersey. We're both Hampton alum. We met, so we talked about relationships and networking. So we were on the yard together, but didn't know each other at Hampton. We met at a Hampton Alumni Conference, regional conference in Delaware, and just saw mutual interest in real estate and building wealth, and then teamed up, and kind of the rest is history. So we've been doing business together the last 10, 15 years or so. We have a couple other partners on the East Chop Capital team. I think we're about 4 full-time employees now. We have 2 fractional or contract employees as well. Our community is pretty amazing. So our East Chop Capital community, we have about 300 or so investors. 90% are black, 10% are white, about 23% are women. all accredited investors, qualified clients, or qualified purchasers who have invested either in our real estate funds or in our syndications. Syndication is a fancy term that means you just pooled capital to invest in a deal, a company, or a real estate opportunity. And we've been rocking and rolling. So the team, I would say, Calvin, my other business partners in East Chop, our East Chop Capital Communities, and of course my lovely wife. We've been married the last 8 years. And I mean, it's tough building a business. It's especially tough when you have as aggressive goals as we do. A lot of sleepless nights, a lot of personal sacrifices. There's another book, Leaders Eat Last, another amazing book. And so there's nothing. The CEO of NVIDIA has been very vocal lately just about how incredibly tough it is to build a business. Also, Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, which runs ChatGPT. A lot of times, entrepreneurship and business ownership is glamorized on TV and social media. There's nothing glamorous or sexy or about business, and especially scaling businesses. A lot of ups, or a lot of downs, some ups, but you stay the course and you keep persevering. So that's the team. My parents have also been very supportive. Didn't really understand it for a very, very, very long time. You were getting that consistent corporate salary, or when are you going to look for another job? Or I'm like, no. But then we had a couple of wins, and then my mom especially realized, she's like, okay, this is it. This is what he's okay. But one other thing I want to say as it relates to a comment Ms. James made about business ownership is a key to building wealth. And you may have seen the articles. There are tons of baby boomers that are retiring and with no succession plans. And I know corporate life can be tough. So I would encourage some of you all, there's something called entrepreneurship by acquisition. So, and most people in here are competent, and you have the skill set to literally run your own business, to be a CEO, to be in the C-suite, to work with your spouse to buy a business, or a partnership group to buy businesses. There are books out there that teach you how to do this, how to value, what to look at, how to leverage and identify your skill sets to be more successful in the type of business that you want to buy. So that's another way that I would encourage you all to think about building wealth, and maybe even doing it full-time, is buying a business.
So Dwight, along that line of business ownership, and you've been through ownership and sale of a business and many times over, what has that experience been like? What advice do you have from a business owner's perspective as that's played a role in your wealth development?
Well, we must have had the same mother, because when I resigned from IBM, I called my mom and I said, this is it, I'm going to do something different. And she said, boy, nobody leaves IBM. Back in the day, go ask them for your job back. Now, years later, she's got the SSI ball cap, the T-shirt, She forgot she ever said that. But starting and growing a business, a lot of people say, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I've said this many times, if you want to be an entrepreneur, two reasons they say. Number one, I want to make a lot of money. Okay, maybe, right? And that takes time. Number two, I want to be my own boss. Anyone here that owns or operates a business, Barb's shaking her head, you're not your own boss. You work for every client and every employee, right? At the end of the day, we did about 6 acquisitions along the way before we exited. When acquisitions occur, if you get it right, it feels good. If you get it wrong, it's problematic, right? So you can grow organically or through acquisition or some combination of both. When it comes time to exit, and again, I'm going to go back and touch on racism, we're going to face some very interesting times under this new administration. I mean, this whole conversation I saw where Walmart pushed back, and I've said to many people of color that look like us, that if you own a business, and I am proud to be an American, I'm even prouder to be an African American. People talk a lot about supplier diversity and all of those things. If your business is highly dependent upon certifications, it's going to be a rocky road, right? When we exited the company 2 years ago, they took a look at all of our financials, and they said the company that bought us was not minority owned, so they wanted to factor out of the valuation the percent of the value that was tied to being a minority certified business. Good for us, it came in less than 5%. We had long-term contracts with good clients that they wanted, so they paid a premium. So we ended up, I wrote a number down in my head, and the offer they made was a 2x of that, right? And so after the George Floyd murder, which is what it was, everyone leaned in. $1 billion round table, right? We're going to spend $1 billion. How many people have heard about that? The $1 billion round table. All the corporations want to do that. I went to a couple of corporations and I said, it's not about spending money and revenue. It's about creating wealth in our community. I said, so why don't you take your spend, what you're spending by commodity, multiply it times the margin associated with that product or service. A times B is C, add it up, and that'll tell you how much wealth you're creating. Because I don't really care that you spend $1 billion. I want you to create a lot of wealth by buying high value, high margin service and products from companies. I talked to the public sector and the private sector, and everyone without exception said, we don't care. We want to get a plaque that says we spent $1 billion, right? But if you spend $1 billion with companies that look like us at a 2 or 3% margin, you have done no one a favor. You have done no one a favor. And I talked to one organization, I said, but we want to sell that high value, high margin stuff, right? And they said, we don't think that people of color have the skill sets to bring those type of high quality services to the table. That's ludicrous, right? So if you own a business, think about your exit. Sometimes you exit, you value on either revenue or EBITDA. And I have friends that are very, very smart that said, I'm going to stay in business another 2 or 3 years because I'm going to push up my revenue, I'm going to push up my EBITDA, I'm going to get a bigger number. That's only one part of the equation. The other part is the multiple. So if you have your business and your business is growing, but the multiple you're going to get paid on it drops from 8 to 4, you're working really hard for nothing. So, don't be married. I'm married to Renee. I was never married to the business. And so we were fortunate, we were blessed that the revenue and the EBITDA was running pretty hot, as was the multiple at that point in time. So when you're in a business, think about that exit. Think about what you can do along the way to maximize the value. Think about value and relationships as opposed to commodities and sales volume. And at the end of the day, you're going to be a lot happier when that check comes.
All right, so at this point, I'm going to ask you to think if there are any questions that you might want to ask this panel. We're only going to have time for 2 or 3 questions. But as you think about that, a question that I want to ask for each of you on the panel, Auntie Audra talks about engineering your reality. For those that are in this room saying, I want to engineer my reality around my road to wealth accumulation, wealth growth, building wealth, what piece of advice? You've dropped all kinds of gems throughout the conversation that we've had this afternoon so far, but what piece of advice would you give to anyone who says, I want to start this process of intentionality around engineering my path towards wealth creation? Donna, I'll start with you and we'll work our way back this way.
I'm going to be very, very basic because I know most of you, and you know me, you cannot live paycheck to paycheck. You cannot live day to day. You have got to figure out how to create that margin between your current income and your expenses. Now, you can do that by working with what you have or trying to figure out how to increase the top number or decrease the bottom number. But get real clear about what you're doing with your resources today, because there is a discipline and a mindset that you have to grow into in order to be serious about wealth creation and wealth accumulation and not have to run this big risk of losing it all because you need it all to live off of. I'm just going to stop right there and let my colleagues take it from there.
I'll say first, set goals and kind of have conceptually where you want to be in life, financially, net worth perspective, and then that'll kind of dictate part of your strategy. We talked about the wealth gap earlier. I was just reading, I think the current status is it'll take over 200 years to close the wealth gap. We are literally in a dire state of emergency. And I've learned this a lot over the last 6 years building East Chop Capital private equity firm. The folks in the black community, the people who you think have money don't have money. They don't have wealth. I'm telling you, it's not there. the 0.05%, the 0.1% of Black that don't have it. So we're very aggressive in our investing strategy. CCOC Collective, people heard me say all gas, no brakes. For the younger folks in this room, like, you have to get aggressive now. Now is the time to get aggressive. And then lastly, I'll say, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, get comfortable being uncomfortable. You got to get outside your comfort zone if you want to help close the wealth gap and leave the next generation in a better place than it is now. And last thing I'll say, artificial intelligence, it's real, it's here. I'm terrified of the impact that's going to have on knowledge workers, which most people in this room are probably knowledge workers, people who work from a laptop. Like all those strategy jobs, the middle management, I'm terrified. So put the work in, be a student of the game. The next 2 to 3 years is going to be very critical in putting your wealth building strategies in place, because beyond 3 years, and Dwight, you're in tech, you know better than I do. I don't know what the future is going to look like beyond 2 to 3 years. Everything's moving so fast.
And I'm going to land right in the middle. Very conservative, fairly conservative, right? He said aggressive 3 or 4 times, right? And talked about risk. I think that they're both right. When you're young and you have a longer runway, I could argue the point that you can take more risk because you have time to recover, right? But always know your risk profile. So if you don't have a long runway, then just allocate some % of your net worth to things that are a little more risky. We looked at our net worth statement, our personal financial statement, and we take about 10% of that, right? And that's just money that we can blow, and we can do some high risk, high reward things. So know what your risk profile is. It will move over time as your situation changes, as you age, and as you create more wealth, right? So just decide what's the level of risk that you're willing to take, and then it's just consistency. You know, this whole get rich quick thing, yeah, that's really not a strategy. And then the last thing is think about your taxes. It's nice to make a lot of money, but it's painful to write those checks. It's a blessing to be able to write the checks, but your wealth grows off of what you keep. It's not the top, it's the bottom. So really understand what your strategy is. It's always great to pay it forward. We always look at appreciated assets at the end of every year or during the year and give those away. There are tax, but get a good CPA that's going to walk you through how can I hang on to what I make, because I can plow that in and create more wealth. Thank you. I'm so honored.
Hey, listen, before we take questions, please join me in thanking this panel for an outstanding conversation. All right, now here's the tough part. So, I always get nervous to say this. We'll see how many hands go. Are there any questions? Okay, I knew there was gonna be a bunch of hands. Okay, so we're gonna go here, then we're gonna go there, then we're gonna go there, okay? So we'll take those 3 questions. If we have a mic, I'm sorry. You know what, we'll get 4, if it can be quick questions. All right, do we have anybody that can run the mic out to people so we can hear? I mean, I can do it too, I'm fast. All right, thanks. Yes, you're right there, yep, perfect.
Just thinking generationally, I know a lot of millennials and Gen Zers are thinking about making kind of conscious choices about where they invest based on, you know, maybe climate impact or this or that. I know maybe new wave, but like, where are your concerns with corporate social responsibility when you're making a choice in where to invest, knowing that that's something that a lot of people are thinking about?
Dwight, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I didn't shop at Walmart before, but I'm certainly never going to shop at them in the future, right? Well look, I think we need to put our money where our mouth is, you know. And I'm watching that list of companies that are dialing back DEI, and I just have zero interest in doing business with them. I understand Costco's leaning in the opposite direction. So let's all walk away from Walmart and walk over to Costco.
Yeah, thank you. Next question, yes.
So we just heard about how when we're looking at, ADHD moment. All right, so as we're thinking about this, as you all are investing and as you're working with people that maybe have different values or are not necessarily always aligned, and sometimes working, like say you're walking into a room of all white folks, and then talking about wanting to be at that table. How do you navigate the challenge sometimes when your integrity is in question, or you're, like, as you rise to the top, there can be a lot in that space that is not lovely or loving. And so what do you do when you're in those spaces trying to invest and close the wealth gap, but also amongst people that maybe you wouldn't be around if you weren't talking investment?
Donna, do you want to maybe tackle that?
It sort of aligns with just how I think about that question in general. Be clear about why you're in the room and what you're trying to get out of it so that you don't get sidetracked by noise. You know, my husband is often, he often says, you know, it's not what you call me, it's what I answer to. And so when you're in rooms and you're getting the pushback, get clear about what you're trying to get out of that room versus getting hung up on what somebody's saying to you and how they're saying it. It's the response that Dwight gave in that moment. And sometimes you got to think of these responses in advance, but you don't stop. You press through and persist through because it's noise. If they're not reaching in your pocket and taking money out of your wallet, you keep persisting forward. If they're blocking you from an opportunity, you strategize to navigate to go around, because there are other people out there who are interested in the same things you're interested in, and you got to find your tribe. You got to find the people that are aligned, because very few people who are about making money are going to be overly concerned about how you look. If you really have a good idea for a business or an opportunity, now they may not give you all that you need, but they are out there. They may look like us or they may not look like us. So it's about persisting, but being clear about the intent so you don't get overly distracted with what they say, how they say it. Stay persistent. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
Thank you. Next, yes.
Hello, my name is Al Wilson. About 6 years ago, I started an investment club with 4 other college friends called the Cashlennials. So a lot of the things you guys talked about was those soft skills. So my question to you guys, how can the concept of group economics, how can we overcome the barriers and accelerate wealth generation by practicing group economics?
Carrington, you want to take that one? You've kind of experienced that, lived that.
Yep. You know, I think first identifying your group, your peers, coworkers, fraternity, sorority, church, you know, whatever the case may be, and be willing to trust, be transparent, share information. And then also, again, going back to learning by doing. You know, a lot of investment groups, you know, put 500 a month here, 1,000 a month here, and then just kind of wait and see, and analysis paralysis, and don't move forward or are not very action oriented, which holds a lot of us back. So I want to encourage that to be a key part of what you do as well. Be action oriented, and then think about ways to scale. Business is hard. It's gotten harder. One of our key challenges are scaling our businesses, part of which has to do with access to capital. But as I started to grow my business, I truly believe that we need large businesses, and many of them at scale, very large, uncomfortable scale. So with your investment group, if you're starting out small, you know, think of ways to scale, where they're bringing on more folks, or whether you're each contributing more money, or you're cutting back, bottom line, you're cutting back your expenses in order to invest more. So those are just kind of some of the tidbits that I would give. And one other thing, a lot of people are trying to start funds now and get into private equity and venture capital. It's extremely difficult, and you need to have scale in order to comfortably afford the operations of a fund: salary, taxes, accounting, compliance. So if the thought of starting a fund has come across your mind, if you can't raise, I would say, at least 25 to 50 million, I wouldn't even start. That's 6 to 8 years of experience. Like, don't spend the time doing that. 25 to 50 million minimum, or don't try to do a fund.
All right. Final question, Randall.
Final question. First, I want to say thank you guys. Last year, I got an opportunity to hear you speak, and I left inspired. And so hearing all 3 of you guys up there today really is motivational. One thing that I didn't hear you guys talk about was the impact on network. and how networking can help to create opportunities. And so, like many people in this room, I'm probably the only black person in the room, majority of the time. And in those rooms, I've been afforded opportunities and been a part of big conversations with opportunities. And I feel like we talk about saving so you can invest in these strategies, but if you're not in the room, how are you able to really, do those things? Because a lot of times we don't know who to go talk to. If I had $100 million right now, I wouldn't know who to go talk to and have those conversations. And
Come see me.
the reason why I asked this question is because about 2 months ago, I had an opportunity to spend 2 hours with Don Peebles at a dinner that I went to. I did not know who Don Peebles was before that dinner. And we literally sat next to each other and talked about all kind of things. He invited me to come hang out with him. And after the fact, when I did my research, I said, wow, like what can we be doing more strategically to get in those type of rooms to have those type of conversations?
They say your network is your net worth. So any final thoughts, maybe from each of you, from any of you, on just the impact of being in the room where it happens?
If it makes you uncomfortable, there's a growth opportunity there. And so sometimes we avoid people and situations because they make us uncomfortable. Learn how to lean into that discomfort. And in that situation, if after the fact you realize you missed a person or you missed an opportunity to connect with someone, engineer a new opportunity to reconnect. It's within our control to do that.
I would say make sure that you're doing what you need to or should be doing to be invited to a particular room. Because sometimes, people are watching. Sometimes people are looking for a behavior or pattern and consistent success and choices for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 years before they're inviting you to the room of the opportunity. So make sure you're doing what you need to do in order to deserve that invitation. And secondly, when you get in that room, it's okay to not know certain things. Again, be a student of the game, learn, ask questions, but don't, make sure you what's the best way to say this? Act right in the room. I'm just gonna say act right in the room, because also those people, the people in the room are also evaluating whether or not you should be in the room and whether you should continue to be in the room and whether they should invite you to someone else who's in the room. You'll get a kick out of this, Dr. Joy. So we recently had our investor summit down in Orlando, and it exceeded all expectations and went very well. And one of our existing investors, would you believe, he had a gripe about paying $700 to get into that room? Like, oh, that's another thing. You got to understand the value of certain rooms. Like some rooms are priceless. Some rooms might be worth $5,000. Some rooms might be worth $10,000, $20,000. Don't be afraid to pay for the value in that room, because whatever the cost is, that soft ROI, the relationship, the learning opportunity, the next business deal can far exceed whatever you paid to get in that particular room. We had professional owners of professional sports teams, expansion teams in the room. We have CEO Fawn Weaver of Uncle Nearest stop by the room. We had a retired PepsiCo executive and a Big Dave's Cheesecake franchisee there. We had Jonathan Moody. Jonathan Moody came down to our investor summit and talked about our work that we're doing down in Alabama, and then just what it's like being a young CEO of a international company. Who else was there? It was a great room. And then over 75 people were in attendance, retired NBA. But it was a good room. So don't be afraid to pay to get into a room that has value.
And he hit the nail on the head. And you're going to hear about boards in a moment from an outstanding panel. And probably one of the things you're going to hear people say, I want to be on a board. People are always watching you, right? Especially when you don't think they're watching. So the way you get invited into the room, whether or not it's an investment or a boardroom, people will say, I've been watching you. I like your thought processes. I like the way you react. So I'd like to bring you in. Some of you may remember a guy named Bill Loda. And Bill was fantastic. That's how I ended up on the board at State Auto. We were on the board at the airport, He calls me one day and he says, hey, I'm on the board at State Auto. I like you. I've been watching you. I like your thought processes. I like the way you interact with other people. May I put you in the cycle? That was a board, but the same thing applies to investments. I mentioned Rockbridge earlier, and so Rockbridge, we have this relationship, and they invited me in to the room, and years later they asked if I would fly out to Colorado to address their investors conference with family offices. That's a 30-second decision. You invited me into the room. I now have the opportunity to stand up for that relationship. But it's always be on your game, always take the opportunity to learn, and there is nothing wrong. When you don't know the answer, that is not a weakness. That is a strength, and that is an opportunity. It just is. Again, I can't thank you enough. This is
Good stuff.
yeah.
Dwight Smith, Carrington Carter, Donna James, thank you all so very much.
And give it up for Luke Fedlam. Great job, Luke, as well. Outstanding panel, as I knew it would be. This one was for me. As an entrepreneur and investor, I wanted to have this one, so I know you took something from it, but thank you. Please do take the gifts that are next to you as a token of our appreciation to all of you. Outstanding job, and you know this is always family. You can always get invited back, so thank you for accepting the invitation once again. Give it up for this panel as they transition. While they are, just in terms of schedule, we're going to move right into, right after the quick transition break, right into the corporate boards panel. We'll catch the timing up this afternoon, so don't worry about that as much. But before we do that, on your tables is an opportunity for you to support the work of the Academy. Many of you are already donors. We appreciate that. But we have some good news. And so as normally happens, our founder and what my mentor, Larry James, calls me casually yesterday morning. And he said, I answered the phone. I think he's going to tell me something about the retreat. He'll be here later tonight, of course. And he said, hey, yeah, Mo, Don and I was just thinking, and we decided we're going to do $50,000 more to the Academy, and we're going to match any gifts that we raise this year. And so I want to announce, first of all, that Larry and Donna have seeded another $50,000, and we want that to be a match. So for every dollar you give, they're going to match dollar for dollar. And so this will be throughout the course of this year. As we celebrate our 20th, there'll be a number of opportunities, but you can make this real simple. Right in front of you is a QR code. If you're ready to activate now, it'll link you right to our partners at United Way, and you can get that gift done electronically now, but we will be making additional solicitations. He also informed me during that call that we've already had our first donor in terms of match, which is the Smoot Company. Smoot Construction is already coming at $5,000 already. And so many of you will be asked to contribute, but thank you to those sponsors. So wanted you all to know that. All right, we're gonna move at 2:15. We will start this panel. I'll let you take bio breaks in and out of the room as you need to, but we're gonna quickly transition to our corporate boards panel following a brief greeting by one of our leadership sponsors and getting these folks in place. 2:15, we'll get right back started with our corporate boards, Am I the Right Fit panel. See you soon.